there's some of you that's going to challenge me on this, but I'm just going to go ahead and admit it. I hate web forms. I hate filling out forms. I hate trying to understand what the forms mean or what the person was thinking that made the forms. I just kind of despise forms. It's a pain. They're never pleasant. It never works out well. And particularly bad are forms you have to fill out all the time. Like the same form, you have to go back in and fill it out over and over and over again. And you're kind of doing the same motions and making the same inputs. And it just starts to feel kind of sluggish and dumb. And you just wish, like, in this age of LLMs that should be able to understand this better, this should go smoother. This really struck me when I went recently to a talk and heard from Emily Smith, and she is the head of Side Nerds, which does SMS messages that use LLMs to interpret that input. And one of the killer apps that she's built is for volunteers who want to record their time. So the volunteer might have said, they might have worked for foster home center and volunteered like 5 hours to work for someone, and they just need to log that time. They need to track what these volunteers are doing, but like getting volunteers to like both do the volunteer work and then log into the computer and here's your username and password and like, yeah, please enter your blah, 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 blah. It's horrible. So she built this great app. They just send a message they just text a certain number, and tell them, what they've done. That thing figures out who they are and logs their time, and they don't have to deal with it anymore. Just quick and easy, boom, boom. And I like that, and I think like I also really like. So I was thinking about like, well, how do could we apply that to BPMN? And so this is like kind of an attempt to do that, because I think like there's a really nice LLMs are great at languages and understanding how to model languages. And so we could use something like JSON schemas, which we use heavily inside of Spiff workflow, to connect, to tell the LLM what we want. And since that's like natural text, a JSON schema just describes data inputs, right? It says the data should be in this format. It should have these fields. Have a start time and an end time and a summary and the project that you're working on. It can say like, the time should be, in hours from like 0 to 24. So you can set all these limits and requirements. And that's what a JSON schema is. It just kind of describes what the rules are about a chunk of data. So great. We could use LLMs to move data from one format into that more structured format and ask questions if it doesn't have it, just continue the conversation until it gets it. And that's like the nice, lossy, stochastic LLM kind of task. It's perfect. But it produces this output then that we can examine, because you can vet that the data does actually match the schema. And you could present that back to the user and say, is this all this correct? And so you get like the BPMN provides the deterministic side, and the LLM can provide the stochastic system. So soft outer layer is your UI. That's just these text messages. But the firm meaty layer of like what has to happen can still be modeled in the BPMN, but in a way that's fun to work with. So let's actually watch this happen. I'm just gonna come into the system here and maybe just quickly walk you through some of the stuff. So this is a BPMN diagram. It's got a start, and an end and a bunch of tasks. And there's a little place here where it can kind of loop back. So this is your agentic loop. So each time the AI doesn't have enough information, it can just decide to go through and request more information from a person. But when it feels like it's done, it can let us out and just let the human person validate it. And the other stuff here is just a few quick scripts. One that like sort of like configures options, like it knows like what the major projects are and what the sub projects are, and then it builds out this JSON schema. And if we go ahead and like start this thing and let it set those, then we can come over here and look at this form. So I'm just gonna come and launch this editor, and you'll see that like that JSON schema can produce a form. Here's the fields that have to be provided: the start time and end time, the project, the number of hours, the summary. So that's the web form, but it's also just like this JSON schema. It's just a nice way to visualize it. but the LLM can process it too. So let's see what happens there. I'm just gonna let this thing play out. It's gonna oh, I should look at this too. So this second script like sets up the stuff. So I'm saying like assume that there's an SMS message that comes in from my phone number, and like I spent 5 hours blah 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 on it. And you know, we set up the API keys and everything and set this message up, and we tell the LLM that it's a helpful assistant who needs to ask questions um, to gather information from the end user, and it needs to. We want to generate the schema that matches it, and we just send the schema into the LLM. We also like tell it what the message is, so that I worked 5 hours on this thing, and we also tell it what today's date is because LLMs don't know what date it is. And then we tell it there's this validator. So once everything's ready, we want you to spit out the JSON data that we want you to spit out the data that we would use that complies to that schema. Makes sense, right? So yeah, let's play this thing and see what happens. So what's this experience like? I text this message in, I hit send, and it kicks off this process. The process then goes and sends something out to one of the LLMs, and that LLM is going to come back and it's going to decide whether it wants to use a tool, which is basically user, or if it wants to gather more information. And it's going to say, so here you can see, I sent in 5.5 hours. I told it what day it was, and I set my user, and we did all this in like scripts that kind of led up to the initial run. It says, thanks, I've captured that you got 5.5 hours on this app starting at this time. This means the end time would be this. What project was this for? And can you please provide a brief summary? And I can say I'm doing some BPMN work to provide a cool demo video. And I'll just hit submit here, and it'll loop back around because we're not done yet. So it'll go back in and pass this information into the LLM, and then the LLM will then send it out and put all the data into this form. And you can see it got the right project, got the right client, the hours are right. So it even did a little bit of math for us. Maybe we don't let it do that. We could probably calculate, well, maybe, probably tell it not to do the hours, and we'll just do the math calculation ourselves and just save it from giving it the opportunity to make a math error. But yeah, that's it. That feels like a better interface to me. I would much rather open up Slack and tell it in natural language what I'm doing or what I did, or hell, have some other things that just auto kick off every time I finish a meeting and generate this, and it'll figure it out. Yeah, so that was it. Thanks for listening. I did want to thank a few other people. So much of this idea between stochastic systems like LLMs and a companion thing that is deterministic. Those are ideas that have come out of my talks with Devin Strickland, and also like to thank Jill Hines, who is really kind of instrumental in helping me think through how do we use LLMs in a way that is safe and using it with a conscience, doing the right thing with LLMs and not allowing them to do the wrong thing or to harm people. So that's it. That's my talk, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Thanks so much for listening.